So this is another thing I'm making. Okay. Again, this is an idea I'm making, and it is not an established concept. I thought, okay, I'll just put it forward. Okay, I'll put it forward. That whenever you come across something, you know so many contexts. Okay, you put this thing. Let's say you come across auto generation field. You know what is auto generation. Fields are auto generated. You try to fit it in other concepts. First of all, will it be transaction data, master data? Will it be my duty, someone else's duty? Among the roles, who will be giving me this requirement? How does it hit? Right? What part of at what part time of SDLC can it hit? It will hit you at the time of requirement. It will hit you at the time of design. Design has to clearly show that the new things are popping. In the testing also this thing will happen. You need to think, क्या होगा testing this बार? At the time of testing, tester will be testing this thing, agreed. But what will his test case look like? He has to enter that, he has to click new number should be assigned. This is how it will look like. You should think what will be the use case around this. Oh, the guy whenever he's creating a new service record, then he will basically do this. In the first few times, it will be difficult to come. This entire matrix, this entire, I call it 360-degree analysis of anything that you study in this. This thing is not for your projects. This is, I'm talking with reference to studying in this class. Whenever you come across something, I'm going to give you, I have at least 16, 17 pointers. You must think around those pointers that, okay, one is SDLC as I'm talking about it. There are other 16, 17 other pointers. And you must think this concept. Do I understand with reference to this thing? Do I understand this concept with reference to this thing? That's when you will start getting a very deeper understanding of any concept that you come across. You must apply this to the GUI basics chapters and chapter 1 and chapter 2 and chapter 3 and chapter 8 and chapter 9, 10 and 11. Okay, these are the main chapters which basically I feel that civil BA has to know. 4 and 5, it doesn't have to know too much of it. 13, 14, 15, 16 are only applicable when you're doing data work. So 12 and 6 and 7 are not there. So whenever you're doing anything in these chapters, you must think this 360-degree view analysis of that concept. You will hear this 360-degree view in other areas also, in other contexts also. Please understand, it doesn't mean the same there. Here I really mean is, I'm going to give you certain areas of thought regarding any requirement and you need to think. First one is SDLC. This context is still missing. Some people know it, what is SDLC, many people don't know. Do you know SDLC? You know the various stages of SDLC? So out of SDLC, you should know how the requirement will look like. Okay, for example, for requirement, let's say requirement is this. Okay, so this is a perfect thing. You hear it in my videos, auto-generated field. Okay, pre-defaulted fields, right? Lookup tables. So let's say you hear lookup table, a concept, a new concept, right? What all you should think about when you hear this concept from me? I would talk about 2 or 3 things. What is it? What are the typical requirements around this? Blah blah blah. I will not cover the 360-degree of this, but you should think yourself whether you understand the 360-degree of that particular concept or not. Okay, in the second run especially. In the first run, if you can understand what is it, then it's fine. For example, master data and transaction data. If you can understand, okay, that main thing that we're talking about, if you are able to understand the little point, that main point, you don't need to think how it will look like in SDLC, what will be the typical requirements. I call it first run. In the first run, you are good if you understand the main point. But in the second run, you need to think about all the other things that I'm going to be talking about now. These are various various things against which you should learn that new concept. Auto-generated is what the example will take. First one is SDLC. How it will fit into the SDLC. For example, during planning phase, do you think something related to auto-generated fields is required in the planning phase of SDLC? No. At the time of requirement gathering, do you think it will come into picture? For example, clicks, perfect example, clicks will not come into picture. But this thing will start hitting you during requirement gathering itself, that we want this field to be automatically generated and that this is a sequence it should follow. SR 1-1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Once it gets exhausted, then new sequences start. Things like that. It should always be 10 digits. The first 2 digits should always be 1, 2 because they mean the area code. Whatever. You will get detailed requirement around the auto-generated field. Think of the requirement then. We got swayed by this think of the requirement thing and we started thinking in terms of requirements. So I want her to now think about these requirements, because otherwise how will she think of the requirements for this particular concept? But it will be hitting her in the second run. In the first run, I really want her to understand everything at the point. Okay, you guys should help her. Whenever she asks a question, tell her this is what it means. Okay, auto-generated fields, ये देखो ये field दिख रहा है, ये automatically generate हो रहा है ना? Every time the value is different. Do you notice? So this field is also coming, but this field is basically automatically generated. This is the main keyword. It is generated and always different value. That is the main keyword. So this is one you should think that you must know. Key point. What is the key point of that? For example, smart script. Key point is it has questions and answers. Depending upon the answer, different field becomes required, and so forth. Different question pops up in front of it. Whereas if you set up a smart script, so having a smart script, if you have it in the applet, then there is no way to control this thing. There are 15 fields available and he doesn't know which one to fill and which one he doesn't need to fill. But if you provide it in the form of smart script, who knows, just as the first question is answered, rest of the questions become useless, do not need to be answered, depending on the answer of the first question, right? Branching is possible. This is called branching. Branching is possible. Branching of data entry is possible, right? Right? But very important thing, on the go, fields and their possible values can be set up. Because questions and answers can be set up in the administration. If in the applet you have 15 fields, can you enter a 16th field on the go? Answer is no. Applets are not administrable. They are customizable or configurable, but they cannot be administered. You know the meaning of that. They are not personalizable for sure. But questions and answer options can be administered. In the administration, it can be set up. This is the second main thing. It is like you are basically setting up new fields and new answer options where the data can be entered by the user on the go, and Siebel will accept these values against those fields. Second one is branching. Branching is what everybody knows and cares about. Second one that I told you, not everybody knows, but I do care about it. I know that's very important. Sometimes there are requirements that on the go, can we create fields? You know, smart script is the answer in that case. Okay. So I'm giving you examples. My idea is not to discuss smart script. My idea is really discuss. So when I was teaching these concepts, even 4 years back, I always thought in terms of this is the main thing. This is the main keyword. Try to capture that part. Even if I have not mentioned it, try to think to yourself, what is the main keyword? Typically, you should be able to define the thing within 3 or 4 words. That this is the key thing that you're talking about. For example, what is primary key? Unique, non-nullable, referenced by other in other tables, right? Always present. These are the 4 key things of the primary thing, right? Always there in every table. You cannot. These are the 4 things you have to write somewhere. Keywords, main keywords is extremely important. Okay. So main keyword probably comes first. I have not written it in any sequence basically. Sorry. Key differentiating thing from nearest confusing concept. Auto-generated always gets confused with auto-populated. When you click On new, these are automatically populated, but these are not auto-generated fields. I mean, when you click on new here, see, this number is automatically generated, and these are automatically populated only. But this number is what I was really emphasizing upon, right? It is following a sequence, right? So this is the key confusing concept is auto-populated. Typically, what I have seen is when my guys are explaining back the concept to me, they always mingle it with the other key concepts. They're novices, right? But the point is, you need to think to yourself, because in general, I'm emphasizing a lot on these things in my videos. Not every time, but I'm trying everywhere. I didn't know. I didn't know how to put it. I just put it like this. Key differentiation. I don't know. From most confusing keyword. This is very important. You need to think what, like, I will be saying this thing again and again, like GUI, business logic layer. It is confused a lot with business logic. That's one. It has nothing to do with business logic. It does something very concrete in nature. You want to call it business logic? Go ahead. But it does something very concrete. The data in the database is broken down into pieces. It just gathers them again. Those pieces are logical pieces. When it breaks down the data into logical relational database oriented pieces, that's what it does. It brings it back. So business logic layer keyword is very clear. It breaks the data and reconstructs the same structure. Simple, right? So key differentiating is from this thing. It is not business logic. It is something very concrete. Main thing. It is also different from database, because in database data is stored. Here only rules are written, right? So you need to think whether you really grasped all ideas about this thing. Especially for any concept, if you come across a new concept, you need to think whether you know this particular thing also. You know the things that it usually gets confused with. Have you noted those down? If you notice those down, you know what is the solution to this? What is the difference? Okay, can you define the difference in like few simple words? Right, that is where you will start to get a clear idea of the point in the second run. Okay, that's fine. Third thing is, do you know of some example in Siebel, like auto-generated field? Do you know where the auto-generated field is? Can you quickly get to it? Right? You need to think to yourself, do I know an example of this thing? So Gaurav, even if let's say I have not explained this thing as an example, you need to come to me and say, Gaurav, give me an example of this thing, because I didn't see an example. Who knows there is no example? That's fine, but I should be saying that. You should be at least thinking about it once. That, you know what? I didn't get it. Auto-populated. Can you show me an example? Right? You should be able to see that, spot those examples first of all. But if you don't see, let's say it's activity plan. Can you show me where is the example here? Okay. If it is about a requirement or something, auto-generated field, for example, will it be a personalization feature, customization feature, or whether it will be an administration option? You have to ask yourself once. I must have said that in my video. Okay? Typically, do mention these things. For example, in auto-generated fields, I must have said, developer will be involved. Clearly tells you it is a customization. Because developer, I would have mentioned something. Okay? You need to really think to yourself once whether you know whether it's personalization feature, whether it is administration or customization. Okay, anything, smart script. What kind of feature is it?
Smart script. You can add.
You need to think whether it's a personalization option, customization, or admin or what. This is a very important thing when you are going forward in the second run. Okay. SDLC तो अभी हमने की भी नहीं ना प्रॉपर तरीके से, मैं इसको सबसे अच्छे तरीके से बताऊंगा. इसमें बहुत कुछ होता है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, any feature, anything that we talk about, any concept, it touches SDLC at multiple places. Requirement planning is, it could be touching at the planning. For example, versions of CV. It hits you at what? Plan. Plan and feasibility study level. Makes sense? Then it hits you version of civil. After that, hits you very less. Once it is determined, then that's what the version is. Obviously, then requirement gathering has to be with that version. All those testing has to be for that version. UAT has to be with that version. That is fine.
What kind of planning? Why?
So there are many touch points. For example, for smart script, it has a very interesting touch point. It is a part of the app admin things that he has to set it up for the initial ones. Sometimes even on the go things, like I said, it can be done on the go, right? Better example is LOV. LOV can be done by like on the go. We understand that, but it should be done by the admin. So before the rollout, before the production rollout, Mr. Admin has to gather all the various fields and their possible choices, all the LOVs basically, for all the fields, and keep it handy with him. Let's say they're doing development, they're doing testing. He has to first set all those things up. Let's say after testing they do this. UAT. In UAT also he has to set all these things up. Then they roll it out into production. Again he has to set all these things up. This is called as app admin data as part of the rollout. You need to think whether app admin will be working on getting this data or not. If it is an administration thing, typically he'll be working. Email templates, questions and answers, smart scripts, activity plans. All these things will be set up by the admin on the first day. Right after the rollout occurs, let's say the developers finish off putting all these things in production at 12 o'clock. From 12 to 5 in the morning, he will sit and set this data. Make sense? How he does, there is a tool. It's not that he really manually enters it. There's a tool. But the point is, it will be right after. See, interesting point, the production rollout has occurred and then he sets it up. And by the time the reps come, he'll be finished. If it is California, before 3 o'clock. Because East Coast agents will start hitting the system at 7 o'clock.
Yes.
Right? So, you need to think SDLC context. I've told you app rollout context. I told you planning context. At the time of planning, do they need to plan how many smart scripts we need to have?
No.
Do they need to get the requirements for the smart scripts?
High level planning? No.
Right. Yes, sir. Actually,
It comes in requirement.
so sometimes we try to portray, because admins will be setting it up going forward. Say, okay, give me all the smart scripts. For the first few smart scripts, I will do it. But this thing, does it have to be finished before requirement gathering?
No.
Why not?
And it will be put in this service request now. That's so we have to first meet the requirement of service request assets or whatever it is.
I agree. Actually, pretty understand. But let me tell you a very important thing. See, let's say 100 users are planning to use the system. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Mr. 1, Mr. 2, Mr. 3, 2, Mr. 100. Right? Do we need to gather this requirement before requirement gathering, in the requirement gathering part? If after UAT also they say Mr. 100 has left the company and Mr. 101 has come, we can simply add it.
Yeah.
It's a matter of till the production rollout, we can keep, this data could change, we are fine. You know why, right? Because system doesn't, this is the data that we just load into the system on the last day. It is not a
some
functionality,
customizing,
it's not a customization. It is not something, so it's basically app admin thing,
Yes.
right? So all the app admin things can be, you can gather the requirements for them till the last day actually, right? We don't do that. Scientifically it can be done, but from methodology standpoint, we should never do that because it's a big risk. On the last day, if they change the user, so we do it like 1 month or 1.5 months in advance. They have to give us the list, but then it does not jive with the requirement gathering sessions for sure. So this particular thing, you need to think: does it hit you in requirement gathering session? No. As part of the workshops, you tell them, you can give us questions and answers, and we'll be able to set it up. We'll be able to set up the branching options. Then they'll say, if smart script is running and they take more than 20 minutes, immediately an email should go out to Mr. Manager. Now you know it's a requirement. This is a customization that you'll have to do. This is not related to smart script, this is related to something else. Right, sir?
Yes.
Now it will hit you in the requirement gathering. And this particular requirement has to be frozen before the development starts. Right side? So I'm assuming you know SDLC. So if you don't know SDLC, you can go through that video later. Okay, that's fine. So during development, it will hit or not. Smart script, it will not hit during development actually, as we know. Testing. It's out of the box functionality, it should work. Why are we paying Siebel $3,000 per license? Right.
Well, if you add,
But still they will, during UAT will it hit? During UAT will it hit?
you have to
This
check.
is a perfect example. Sometimes I ask a question in my interviews. Can you give me an example of a perfect bug that will not be caught during functionality testing but will be caught during UAT? Smart
Yes.
script.
How
Because
do
smart
you-
scripts are supposed, this functionality system is ready. Siebel has provided this functionality out of the box. But when the UAT, smart script has to be set up in the system. They will come and use the system like a black box. They will want the smart script to be there and they will want their user ID to work. You keep explaining, your user is not working, but it's a matter of 1 minute for me to set it up. No, it has to be working before they come in. Making sense? So if the user ID password doesn't work, it is a problem. So you know that it has to be set up. Jane Baker comes in, says, I need to log in system. She'll raise big halalu. I could not log into the system. What kind of $20 million software you have bought? I could not even log in. You say it's a 1 minute problem and I can solve it in the next 1 minute and I will set you up. You're not set up. She will understand till it is just her user ID password because she's intelligent, but she won't understand the smart script thing. If the smart script is not set up properly, she comes in and she tests it like a rat as part of UAT. It will hit us, she will realize that smart script is not working properly. It will be raised as a functionality defect, as if system is unfunctionable. Although you know that it's just admin task and you just have to do, a good, job at administering the smart script. Right? You probably can go behind the scenes and tweak it in the meantime and say, show me how it's not working. They do that for them.
Yeah,
Say,
it says, no, you must have typed something wrong.
Yeah. Say, oh, just reboot the system. Maybe it's because of your reboot. He's like, you told me it doesn't matter rebooting and all these things. No. Sometimes like system is very.
System thinks
Just
you
reboot.
You won't
He
understand.
reboots. Actually, rebooting will not work. But you're trying to say that rebooting.
Buy some time.
Yeah, buy some time. The fix हो जाता है. It will hit heavily. Any admin level thing will hit. Auto-generated fields. These will hit in UAT. During functionality, tester will say, I know it will work. But during auto-generated fields, during UAT, it has to work. Okay? So, during development, everything hits. Pretty much. Okay? So, point is requirement gathering, functional design, UAT, production rollout, maintenance, will it hit during maintenance, planning before, will this hit in those areas of the SDLC? You need to think once whether this concept that I'm studying, will it hit your job as part of various phases of SDLC. Making sense? One of the things I've always observed is if you think in terms of how will I test this requirement as a tester, it will increase your perspective very heavily because you are a BA, you provide functionality. When you're testing this thing, you have to see various flavors of this particular requirement and see how it can go wrong. That's when you really, challenge your mind to think what will be the right negative test for it. For example, auto-generated field. What will be the right negative test? It should not generate when you're updating the field. That just makes you think deeply. Okay? Think about all these things. Right? Whenever you're coming across a new concept, think about all these things. SDLC is also covered now. Okay. Another thing is that you should think about is whether this data is relevant to other systems or not. Any concept, auto-generated fields. How can this be relevant? If I generate something, it's just another data going to this thing. It's like a last number. No, no, no. Sometimes we have to get the series from them. Remember we talked about it? Another system is generating numbers. We are generating numbers. We have to. It hits us now. Sometimes I've talked about these things in my videos. Sometimes I haven't. Well, even when it is applicable, I've not talked sometimes. But typically try. Like for example, DB profile of an account. I have talked about it. I remember. You need to get the database profile from the third-party systems. So not Dun and Bradstreet profile from the third-party systems. I've talked about it in account management. I know that. So you need to think. You need to catch these ideas. Oh, very clearly he's saying some third-party system it's interacting with. Similarly, submitting order. I'm talking about it. It gets submitted. Similarly, smart scripts. Typically, questions and answers in some of these companies are not maintained in Siebel. In some other systems, these are maintained. They'll maintain questions and answers in some other system because एक question answer नहीं होता. They may be having 50,000 questions and answers, 300 questions and tens of answer options. It makes it 300,000 records. There are some good systems just to administer questions and answers. This is such a big market, guys. SmartScript. If you make a very good system out of the box, which can only help you create question and answers, manage question and answers. So what they do is there are some good systems where you can select question and answer, question and all the answer options will flow to the Siebel. That's how the console works. They look at a good question and say, okay, I want it in Siebel because I want to make it a part of SmartScript. They click, it will go to Siebel next day. And it will be available in Siebel for creating the SmartScript. Products. Can the products be maintained in another system? Whoa, 120%. Products are never maintained in Siebel. Can products be maintained in Siebel? Answer is big no. Product master of all these companies, they basically maintain a product master. There are product master systems. We talked about various systems, right?
Yes.
Product masters, account masters, we talked about. Product masters, ooh. It's very hard to maintain a products master system. Do you know this? And Siebel is typically used to sell certain products. Those are the products which are in Siebel. But that is not the master copy. Master copy is somewhere else, in some other product master. That's where all the attributes of that product are set. Yes. And let's say they will, in their dashboard, they'll say these three products should go to Siebel because Siebel should also start. Or they will not do like this. Sometimes they'll simply come and enter those three products in Siebel. They'll get a copy, not in sync copy. But then, how does it matter? We just have to enter transactions against those products, right? So that's fine. The point is, there is a systems context here. You need to think in terms of some kind of a systems context. Like, can this auto-generated field, SmartScript? I talked about it. When you hear SmartScript, you should think once. Outlook integration, it has everything to do with only third-party integration. Some system is getting integrated with Siebel right there. When you think in terms of an integration with another system, think of the handshake, actual handshake. The way I explained, they will mention these questions need to flow and they will flow into Siebel. Obviously, the handshake will occur that this question should go into Siebel. The question message, what will be the part of the message? This question is going to come as part of the message, right? Right? You need to think in terms of what is the exact message shared between the systems. Whenever you're thinking in terms of the systems, two systems, and okay, SmartScript, so auto-generated fields. Okay, this will just go as part of the message as a field. Simple. Sometimes it's simple, sometimes it's complex. Makes sense? So you need to think in terms of that. For example, or submission of order. It will go to the order fulfillment system. We always talk about it. You know what all will go? Credit confirmation does not need to go. That needs to go to the payment gateway, right? Shipping address needs to go. Name of the contact should go, and account name should go, and the product detail should go. Any configurations will go. Pricing does not need to go. Pricing does not need to go. I take it back. Pricing might need to go because if they have to put a bill of sale as part of the box, which you get, right? And if they have to put the price in it, if they have to put the price in it, if they have to send the invoice as part of that, then it will go. So that entire message will be having a lot of things. And then you need to think it will go to the auto fulfillment, or it will go to the payment, or it will go to the financial system, or what? Making sense?
But it won't go with the.
My videos lack one thing, I know it, exercises. Okay. Bring it to table. I'll tell you the exercises and you can do those exercises. Typically for the first 3 chapters and the GUI basics and 8, 9, 10, 11. Actually those exercises are there. I'm not able to distribute it effectively. That's why you guys don't have it. Okay. But if possible, you should do the exercise. Well, for auto-generated field, it's very simple. Click on new, oh, exercise away. I can see the auto-generated field. There's nothing more to be done. For smart script also, it is not very difficult. We tried to do it, right? It didn't work. But then you can create a new smart script and it will work. It's not too difficult to create a new smart script. Do that if you really have time. That will really make the ideas very crisp in your mind. Okay? So exercise is something that we need to do. Whenever you are doing something, when learning new thing, think if you can do some exercise. For example, if you're talking about planning, so we can think of something like an exercise. So I can just produce some exercise for you guys, and I'll keep a record and I'll give it to you guys. But exercise is something that you, if possible, you should do. Okay. There's another thing that is called as best practice. Have you ever heard of this word?
Yes.
Many times.
Really? Okay.
I was there
So-
this month.
There are some best practices in every thing, like auto-generated fields. What are the best practices? Is it even applicable? Yes, it is. There are best practices for auto-generated fields. One of the best practices is it should not be a tongue twister. If it is customer facing, something that you want to plan to give to the customer, it better not be tongue twister. It should be something nice, easy to remember. At least just numeric, no alphanumeric, no alphabetic. It should be numeric. That's why your account IDs with AT&T is all numeric. That's why your SSN is all numeric. Right? The point is, you need to think what is the right best practice. Okay. So best practice is a very common word in various industries. It means really the recommended practice. It's called as best practice, but it is not, or ideal practice, best. Whatever.
My graduation was in biotechnology, right? So we have a lot of. So that's the way I said many a times.
So in Siebel, there is a best practice for many things. For example, what is the best practice of gathering requirement? Workshops. That's the best practice. So Siebel has this coded things, best practices for everything. Sometimes it will just make sense to you and you may not need to even think. But let's say some customer says, I want to know tomorrow what are the best practices for smart scripts. Go Googling, don't ask me. I don't know all this, dude. But you guys do this as part of your chapters, like when you guys, why don't you guys try to search for some best practices for smart scripts, for auto-generated fields. There are some best practices for auto-generated fields, especially when the riddle is complex, right? So think about all these things. There's other main things coming, don't worry. But definitely think about all these things. So I'm trying to again and again say, because, okay, we talked about any best practice. You need to think in terms of any best practice. Sometimes there are best practices at process level, sometimes there are Siebel level. What is a best practice in itself is a big chapter, but if you do not know, then you can ignore this. It's not a very big deal. Okay, this is just ongoing investigation. You need to think of anything, any concept that come in front of you from a process level and from a functional level. Remember we talked about a few levels. Technical level, you don't need to worry. From a process and function level, you should think. From a process level, auto-generated fields, what value do they provide? For process level, like they need a unique number so that every person, every service request can be uniquely identified so that they can pull it. That's a process level thing about auto-generated fields. From a function level, when they click on new, it shows, it pops up a new number. When they click on new again, it pops a different number, newer number. Making sense? That's the process and functional thing. Similarly for smart script, what does it process level, what value does it provide? What is it about? You need to think about all this. Okay, right? And then again from the functional perspective, you need to think about this thing. Another thing that you need to think about is, this is probably the trickiest thing. For lack of a better name and for positioning myself in the civil BA training market, I'm going to call it GS functional diagrams.
What is GS?
God, single. You need to draw the singular functional diagram. You need to know how to write. Just मैं आपको समझा दूंगा what is singular functional diagram. You get any picture, any new point, you need to draw the singular function diagram. This is a very important diagram. You need to draw. I can give you an overview, then I will explain it in the other thing. Zip code functionality. How does it work? Database is involved, server is involved, this is involved, that is involved. There are many things involved. We don't care about all these things. We only care about the components which are described in singular form diagram, which is, in the GUI there will be a field zip code city state. It will be on one of the applets. When someone enters zip code, system, a server system, a request goes, and request goes that city and state is needed for this zip code. A lookup table is there, which the request basically goes to that place. This request basically is a server or a servant. That servant goes to that lookup table, gets queries by the zip code, gets the city and state, and comes back and shows in the client. So I call it servant in my diagram. That servant, if you can think this thing, how a servant will go and get, what does he need to be able to complete this request, you are perfectly fine. You can easily understand any system message exchange, any functionality which is heavily dependent on the request and response from the server. Okay. So what properties do you need in this particular lookup table? You cannot go wrong now. You need to have a unique entry for every zip code. If the zip code is occurring twice, this whole table will be corrupt and you cannot provide this functionality, because you need to get one answer. If that servant has to go there and get the city and state. Same two separate zip codes can have the same city and state, that doesn't matter. But if the zip code is occurring twice, then this functionality will not work. Because you know the 2-3 skeletons, the applet, the fields at the GUI, the servant, and the lookup table. You can easily think through the entire chaff. There's a lot of gandamand, a lot of dirt. You don't have to worry about that dirt. Just worry about the components that I have described here. And you can easily think in terms of whether you can support a functionality or not. And if that functionality has to be supported, what do you need? You need this lookup table, which is not provided out of the box. You need to code this servant logic, that he should go to the zip code and bring the city and state. And you need to provide those 3 fields at the GUI level. This is exactly the gap analysis. If you can give the algorithm for that servant, he should take the city and go to this lookup table and get the city and state. Then you have explained what all components are required to make this functionality work. So that's why I'm calling it singular functional component diagram. All the functional components, all the logical pieces that you need, all the bits and pieces that you need to make it work. Right? So if you can think in terms of these 3-4 things, then you can easily envision any functionality. And you need to think in terms of that, this diagram. When you think in terms of auto-generated field, right? So think about it. Let's say the generation algorithm should be the next one. Person clicks on new, so new button in the applet. When person clicks on new, it tells the servant, I need a new number. Servant doesn't know to go to any table. Does he need to? He doesn't. He does need to go to the table to find out what was the last number it generated. So for that, he doesn't need to go to the table. He can keep a record with himself that I generated this number, like a referee keeps a track in his pocket. Like the 3rd ball was just ball. He keeps changing it. He doesn't have to go and check with anybody. He can keep a track. He can keep track of it. But if we cannot, then we have to maintain a table. CA doesn't have the capability to store anything. We know that. Servant cannot store. So he goes to the database. There is a place where this is written, what was the last number that was generated. He adds 1 to it. That code logic is written there. And he comes back and generates this thing. You need a placeholder for that number. You need this logic in the servant. You need this thing at the GUI, the field and the new button. All these changes will be required in the when you're doing the gap analysis to provide this functionality. You now map it, what is available in Siebel. Well, luckily, as you guys know, new is available, this thing is available, everything is working, so that means all the functional components are there. All these logical components have to be there from a functionality perspective. Where do they reside? How do they work? How do these black boxes work? You don't need to worry. But these black boxes are required. That is what my understanding says, and that's what you need to think only this deep and this wide. Don't think too much about this. Where will this component be stored? How will this get executed? Don't worry. What language will be in? It is in C++ or this Java. Don't worry. Just these are required. Every BA is able to think like this. Every BA should be able to think like this. This is the singular functional component diagram. Okay. The day you are able to think like this in terms of the singular functional component diagrams, you will be perfect. You will be perfect BA. You can easily, you will be a perfect BSA first of all. A business system analyst doesn't need to know anything about Siebel. Doesn't need to know anything about SAP. But when Siebel and SAP exchange data, what message should go, what all processing should occur, and what should come back is what a BSA thinks about all day long. So one of my good candidates is in one such project. She only has to worry about, she doesn't have to know about Siebel. They're telling what are the different jobs that are running, the different batch jobs running between various machines, between various systems, and what are the messages exchanged. She has to really become a master of that. For example, they are saying that if application status is enrolled, then do this thing. She knows that the application status enrolled is actually in another system. Application status is in our system, Siebel, but then whether it's enrolled or not is separate. Till we get the message from this system, whether it is enrolled or not, we cannot send the message further down to another system saying that it is enrolled or not. Simple, right? So one option is this guy should send the message directly to that system. Second option is we send. It sends it to us, we send. Why are they going with what will be again a part of analysis. But the point is, if you think in terms of the functional components, the logics that need to be executed, you will not go wrong. Why I try to give it a different name? You know, you must have heard of servant analogy. You might have heard of the lookup table. You might have heard of the logics. You might have heard of the fact that processing is required. You might have heard of GUI. Everything is, you know. Why can't I just name it after something like that? Because whenever they talk about processing logic, they also talk about 20, 30 other things. I don't want you guys to think in terms of gun the month. It's real dirt. I want you to think in terms of just basic functionality every time. Whenever they talk about system exchanges, they also talk about HTTP layer and ABC layer and processing logic and this logic and that logic and weird logic and that logic. I don't want you to think too much. Just think in terms of, to me it's very clear. New button, that field, servant, algorithm, and a table where this number is kept, the latest generated number. There is nothing beyond this. If you can think in terms of this thing, you will never go wrong while doing the gap analysis or while envisioning how the functionality will work. Making sense? So that's why I came out with a different name. And I tried to think, what will be the right name which will suggest what it does. I could not think of anything. Then I had the choice of, naming it after something. I just named it after my surname. If you guys notice, I always explain in terms of this functionality. When the revenue is generated, it rolls up, it adds up, and then this thing is generated. This logic can be just in this thing here. We don't need any support from database, right? And that's what I'm really using. I'm basically speaking from those functional components. Okay. Last but not the least, I don't know why I've written investigate in Siebel. So if you guys have a lot of time, maybe in the third run, you should investigate it in Google. What is smart scripts all about? Are there any vendors who generate, who sells smart scripts methods? For example, Exact Target, something someone was mentioning today. It's a tool used for importing data into CRS COD. That's what it is. So you need to find out more and more things. really that's not the third run, that's after the project run. You guys can command enough maturity not to get swayed by other things, but just get to the target very quickly, only after like a while. Otherwise you'll be hitting so many pages and you won't know what to do. So you need to think in terms of like investigate on Google, investigate on Smartscripts, IT Toolbox, things like that, and do your work. So these are the main things that you need to think about whenever you're thinking of a new functionality whenever you think of anything, any new concept, whenever you come across in my videos, you need to think in terms of all these things. Okay.